Good afternoon and welcome to another episode of SKB Law Podcast, and continuing the final series in our theme of Let's Talk Therapy. Again, we have Ayesha Bhatti with us today, therapist. We will put her contact details at the end of this podcast should any of you want to contact her, speak to her, and obviously you can contact me at skblaw.co.uk if you have any queries around separation, family matters or divorce. And today we are going to be talking about generational trauma. Now, it's a big subject, but it seems not many people still know much about it. And we're going to investigate what it actually is, what you can do to become aware of it, and how you can heal from it. So, Ayesha, welcome.
Hi, thank you.
Our next episode of how to examine and look at generational trauma, what tools we can use to try and manage it. So I think the first question we should ask, so the viewers know what we're actually discussing in detail, is what is generational trauma?
I think the best way to describe it is it's like an emotional wound that's been passed down from previous generations, like your parents, your grandparents, ancestors, and that emotional wound is passed down to you and the next generations, and it can cause a lot of emotional upheaval, development of unhealthy coping mechanisms, mental health problems, behavioural issues, relationship issues. For example, if you've seen relationships from previous generations and this is how relationships are, whether they're especially unhealthy relationships, and that's what you've seen, then there's a tendency for you to follow that pattern and develop unhealthy coping mechanisms as a result of that trauma.
And why would you say, do you develop those unhealthy behaviours? Is it because of nature or nurture? So is it the environment you're in? Is it the behaviour you're seeing in front of you and you're learning it? Is it always passed down directly from the generation above?
I mean, it can be intergenerational as well. It can be, watching siblings, watching family members, watching communities as well. People within your communities behave in a certain way and passing on a certain kind of ethos or certain values that they embody or feel that they're values. So it can be passed down in many different ways. Generational, it usually relates to the generation previous, those patterns of behaviour that have been passed down, but it can be, between sets of people that you're with at the moment who have also acquired them unhealthy coping mechanisms. And I think unhealthy coping mechanisms are just coping mechanisms, and we sometimes don't even know that they're unhealthy until we've hit rock bottom or there's been an incident or there's long-term, long-enduring mental health problems and we've gone for support and someone's pointed it out, or we've just wanted support because it's not serving us anymore. That behaviour is not serving us, because we're all just trying to survive, aren't we? We all just try and do the best, and sometimes we develop coping mechanisms that we think are going to help.
And how do you identify those, if it's possible to unpick it from other traumas that maybe a patient of yours is exhibiting? How is Ayesha able to say when she's doing a session, actually this could be to do with generational trauma?
I think an example is with addiction, where there's been abuse and neglect, and I've got clients who have come at face value with an addiction. But addiction is always a symptom of, I find that it's always a symptom of something else. Not always, but in most cases with the people I work with, I found that it's not just the addiction. There's always something underlying. People are trying to self-soothe, self-medicate. So as part of our kind of intervention, we look at those reasons why people use and why they turn to addiction. And when you unpick that and go back to the reasons, it oftentimes there's underlying issues like abuse and trauma and neglect and historical things from childhood, and you can see that in someone's development. When I've got clients and they've got attachment issues and they're struggling with their relationships and then they just can't have relationships, they're very detached, And their parents, sometimes their parents have had trauma and the parents have not been able to give them the attachment.
Yeah.
They're very disengaged from the family. They're there, but they're not there. So there's a massive, they're dislocated from the family.
To be fair, you're quite correct in that. We have seen that kind of, when we deal with either separation or divorce issues with clients, and one of the main issues could be, and it's quite common for us to hear this theme, that the other party or the other person in the marriage is disengaged. They don't give that person the attention they want. Emotionally, they're absent. And they can't think of a reason for it, because it wasn't there before, but this behaviour has started manifesting quite regularly, and they've tried to talk to this person, but not getting anywhere with them. And so the marriage or the relationship just fizzles out. And when you say it like that, is obviously I'm interested. Obviously, we do family law. That's our job.
Of course.
But a big part of our work is trying to prevent things getting to the state where there's separation or there's a divorce because of the children that are involved. And ultimately, at the end of the day, we're here to help if things go, wrong. But you don't wish anyone to have a breakdown of a marriage or relationship. So this kind of theme of clients saying to us, we don't know what went wrong in the marriage. There just was not any emotional attachment anymore. Exactly what you said. If they... And that's the next bit I want to get onto, is that how does someone become aware that they may have a form of generational trauma, and what can they do? What's the first step in trying to deal with that? Because that's what I'd like to say to my clients. Have you maybe tried getting some help or someone to talk to as partners or separately? I suppose I'm asking you simply is, can it be fixed? And I know that's a really simplistic question.
Yeah, but it's a good question.
Okay, so
Definitely
can it?
a good question. We're in the business of change. Yes, everyone can change. Everything can be fixed, I think, with the right support, the right environment, and you mentioned the question of how do people know? Well, trauma generally will manifest in other kind of behaviours, other mental health issues like depression, anxiety, PTSD.
Yeah.
So at that point, you would need support or some kind of intervention if it's.
Does it have to get that bad before
No.
real help can help?
No, it doesn't have to get bad. It could be, you just noticing that there's a change in your partner's personality. There's a change in, affection, attachment, behaviour. But it's hard to make anyone change if they can't see it themselves. So that it does involve a lot of self-awareness and a lot of, looking at your part in things. So even within the breakup of a marriage, the breakup of a relationship, being aware and having a look at your part. Well, what we all, it's easy to look at what other people do, but, looking at yourself and being self-aware in terms of, well, what am I doing wrong, or where's it gone wrong for me, and why has it gone wrong for me?
Yeah.
It won't just manifest in, oh yeah, that's, generational trauma. There'll be other things,
Of course, yeah, in and amongst it.
Yeah. And sometimes getting to the crux of where that's come from could lead back to, okay, this is where it's come from, because this is how I was brought up, and this is what I was told, and this is what my culture expected of me, and and that's what's made me anxious and stressed and not being able to be my authentic self because I've had all this expectation on me, and so there's so many complexities, but a lot of it is having awareness around, even if it's just something really small, that there's changes in you, changes in your personality, you're not finding the same things appealing, and the enjoyment's gone out of life.
There's a difference, isn't there? There is some difference. You mentioned something really interesting, which was the cultural aspects and the expectations. And, there's a lot of young people that weighs heavily on in terms of, living in in the UK, for example, but having those same traditional expectations, you know, the cultural norms that they do find, you know, quite difficult to navigate. So if someone was able to, as you say, become aware that there's some generational trauma, and a cycle, as they say, of generational trauma has to be broken, and they've become aware of it and they've got some help, how do they then deal with the whole community side of it? Because how do we change? We can change ourselves, I suppose, by using these tools that someone like yourself can introduce into our lives. But how do we then manage that with a community that's still quite heavyweight in, I don't know, I sometimes feel our community wears it like a badge of honor, this generational trauma, you know, the whole Lokia Genge thing. It's like early on in my career, I saw women who were expected to put with abuse and were told to sehele, put up with it, because it was a quite a toxic generational trait.
Yeah.
But it was carried on from, you know, aunts and grandparents and parents and all that kind of thing. How do we manage that, Ayesha? Because I mean, that's a huge task, isn't it?
I think it is a huge task as a community, but I mean, there's so many, you know, different kind of organisations in the community that should take a lead on creating awareness and promoting, you know, promoting that kind of those kind of narratives, those cultural narratives that can be really damaging for us as a community, as a culture. And I think, you know, that's how to do it, is create awareness. Social media, we've got it at our fingertips at the moment. We can use it for so easily accessible, and you know, it's about creating that awareness and promoting them things that are not, they don't serve us anymore as a community. We don't need to do that anymore, and we do that to protect ourselves. It's a defense mechanism, isn't it?
Yeah, it's like you said, survival.
Yeah,
and we don't want to throw all the traditions and cultural aspects out, because there's some very empowering traditions, and maybe, you know, making people aware of those in our community, because it always seems to be the heavy stuff that is perpetuated and pushed around. And, you know, like you mentioned, the expectations. I had a client the other day who 6 months previously has decided that she wants a divorce, was pressurized into marrying her cousin, and went along with it, only child, and just has got to a stage where she's obviously ended up married and now cannot continue with the whole expectation of making this marriage work, because she's just not feeling this marriage at all. It's just not what she wanted, and she went through with it because of the pressure and the emotional kind of blackmail, as she called it, from her parents and family. And she's ready to take that first step, but there's something that always pulls her back, and that is what if I get this whole backlash from the community, from my family, from my friends? How do I cope with that? Now, I suppose that's not peculiar just to South Asian marriages. I'm sure the whole what will people think if I separate or divorce is in every situation like that. But it just seems to be, do we not let go so much? Why do we feel that we should interfere in other people's personal situations so much? As a community, I feel that happens a lot.
I think it's because we're so kind of, sometimes we can be a bit insular as well and interconnected. You know, even in the good parts of our culture and community, we're very close and we're interconnected. So the same happens when there's the negative stuff, you know, and no one really wants to shine a light on negativity in your community, especially in your home.
Yeah.
And if you can't do that in your home, if you haven't got the support in your home, because I always find when you're home, when you're supported at home, it doesn't matter what anyone else thinks, as long as it starts at home and you've got that support at home.
There's still elements of it,
of course.
But if your home's on board, then
you can kind of, you know, deal with everyone else's kind of criticism and backlash. But if home's not on board, then it makes it difficult for that kind of you know, interfere with your decisions, and then you are going to think, you know, what's the backlash going to be? And it does stop you from doing it, and people will stay in situations longer because they're scared. And you know, I've got a family member who, you know, sometimes I think about, and it's quite shocking in this day and age, but you know, she got the same thing. You can't leave him because what's my mum going to think? Because it's a cousin marriage, and my mum's gonna, my mum won't survive it. And it's like, oh my God,
So it's
this
a lot
is
of that, yeah.
this is the emotional baggage and the emotional pressure and the emotional manipulation you have to deal with. And I don't think it's coming from a bad place. I think again it's generational. Well, I did it. I had to marry my cousin and I put up with it. So
That is 100% the point, that's the justification, isn't it?
Yeah.
That I went through it, my mum went through it, we didn't say anything, and we're okay, sort of.
Yeah.
So you should be okay. But I think as well as ourselves saying that we won't be carrying that generational trauma on, and being aware, like you said at the beginning of this conversation, but there's also got to be a certain amount of awareness and education and information to the older generations. But
Yeah.
are they is it too late?
I don't ever think it's too late. I think we can all change, even subtle changes make a massive difference within the families, within communities. But I think it's about you as a person trying to create that awareness, and starting with family members and trying to talk about what it was. And sometimes I do it, and I do it with humour because I can get away with it. But I will say things at home and with family members, and I'll just joke about stuff and to bring it to light.
Yeah. So we need to have these conversations.
Yeah,
That's what
we
you're saying,
do.
is
We
that
need to have the
however,
conversation.
whether through humour or otherwise,
Yeah.
we need to have in our homes regular conversations about this. I do find that people won't talk about things a lot. They won't be open. They don't want to express their feelings. And the irony is, I think that the community as a whole, we're quite dramatic.
Yeah.
South Asian community can be quite dramatic sometimes. But when it comes to really owning up and taking a look at some of the toxic behaviours, like the misogyny that's perpetuated,
Yeah.
I think the next generation is standing up a little bit to it.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
But I don't know how we can really. We're now going into third and fourth generation in this country, and you and I previously off camera we spoke about the residual trauma of our grandparents maybe, and maybe our parents. I know certainly with my parents there was an element of that whole colonial shift from India to Pakistan, and being left with nothing, and all that fear, and then the parents trying to raise their children with whatever they could, and holding on to the tradition and culture and religion was all they had, really.
Yeah.
Literally they had no possessions. So is that why a lot of our sort of older generation are holding on to that, because it was good enough for our parents, it's good enough for us?
I think so. I think there's comfort in pattern, isn't there? And comfort in not changing things. Change is difficult. It's scary, and you have to look at your own behaviour. And I think the interesting point is that like for example in COVID and when there's issues that come up and the colonial stuff comes up, and I think about my grandparents and that generation and how they will just listen to what they're told and they won't question it.
Right.
And I saw that in COVID a lot, like because all our lives, even me growing up, and I remember my parents saying, no, the doctor's right, you just listen to the doctor, this is what we do, we don't question it. And I never ever questioned it up until in COVID, when family members were passing away and there was a lot of ambiguous grey areas about how it should be treated and what's happening. And so I think we've come through a generation where they've just accepted
It's that mindset.
they're still colonised in a way.
Yeah, colonised mindset.
Yeah, and it's still, but are they aware that they're colonised? Are they?
Not unless, I suppose, somebody points it
Someone
out.
points it
Some
out.
younger generation. Because I
Yeah.
see these kind of conversations quite a lot between my mother and my daughter. And they're really interesting conversations because they're coming from two different viewpoints. And, even my mom, who's the only daughter with 5 brothers that she had, the way she was brought up is she doesn't realize that some of the misogynistic comments that she's making, she doesn't mean to make them. She obviously loves her granddaughters and grandsons equally, but it just comes out as, and it's until you point it out, there's that, really, am I really saying that? Are you feeling that I am saying that? And my daughter's quite vocal, and she's like, yeah, Nani, this is what you're saying, and why should that apply to boys and not girls, and why are boys held in greater esteem? And it's all, I don't know. There's a lot of it still, but I see elements of it changing, and with people like yourself who are helping people who are having severe consequences because of this generation trauma, I think it's a start. But I agree with you. As a community, we need to recognise it. We need to unpack it. I've got an interesting question for you, though, and it might not be directly related to generation trauma, but I think there's elements of it, is that this whole expectation, and I don't see it probably is in some other communities, but I can only speak from the community that I live in and the community that I work in, is that why is there this whole expectation on women that if you're not married, then you're not worth anything? You can be a neuroscientist, you can be an astronaut, you can be the CEO of an amazing company, but if you haven't got that label of being a married wife, why are you? And I don't see that in, for example, the white community.
No.
There's not that kind of expectation that, yeah, you can do what you like, but unless you're married, then
it
doesn't count. And that's quite a massive,
you're not even a full citizen, are you, if you're not
You're not
married?
even a citizen. It's like, and it's, I can see my mum still saying that, even though the grandkids in her family have done amazingly well, mashallah, but there is still that, oh, well, when are you going to get married?
Yeah, that is the burning question, isn't it?
The burning question.
It's amazing that you're a doctor and you've cured cancer, but when are you going to get married?
Exactly. There's a little bit missing here. Yeah,
that's really good. You've done all that, but when are you getting married?
Yeah,
and I think it's a really valid question, because I still get asked that question. I've got friends that still get asked that question. It's always a burning question. And I just think our worth is determined by whether we're married or not, whether we've got kids.
Yeah. And is that a generational trauma thing? Is that because they were maybe taught that that's the only thing that, when women weren't so career orientated, for example? I'm just trying to unpick it. I don't know the answer here. I'm just, really enjoying the conversation with you. Is it because they felt that that was their only way or success in life at one point, before education, before careers, and then that stayed with them?
I think so. I think generationally, I think, when I was growing up, it was, there weren't many women going out to work. Your role was as a mum at home looking after the kids. Traditionally, my dad went out to work, mum was at home looking after us. And when I looked around in the community, it was quite similar with my aunties, friends, family. But as we've kind of graduated and things have changed, and also, like, culturally, in Western societies, you are pushed to leave the home as a woman, to go out and work, probably, so you can get tax and things like that.
Yeah.
But, there's a big push for it in the West, isn't there?
Yeah.
And we've assimilated, haven't we? We've developed in ways where we're happy to go along with that. And, we've developed careers and education, which is absolutely amazing. But culturally, and looking back at expectations from our previous generations, I think your worth is measured by whether you're married or not, even now, even with all the advances and the amazing careers women are doing. And
And is it because we're now carrying two loads? We're carrying the load of our own community, of marriage, that's your be all and end all, and then now, because third and fourth generation are growing up in a Western community, where women are pushed to do well in their careers, so we're trying to do both. We're trying to manage that expectation and that one as well.
I think we're trying to do both. I think we want it all. We want our culture, because it's an amazing culture, and it's part of our roots and belonging. And especially with things, the kind of changing dynamics in the world now towards Muslims and things like that. We're seeing a big shift in attitudes towards us, even when it's quite subtle. It's there.
Yeah.
So I think that also makes us want to kind of hold on to our roots and our culture, which it should be celebrated and we should be really proud of it. But at the same time, we're still trying to, be part of a Western community, Western culture, because we live here. We need to integrate. We need to be able to, stand in positions of authority and develop careers and stand shoulder to shoulder with other people of different cultures. Why not? But we still have that pull from our own community and expectations from our community.
Yeah. And what another sort of word that I want to bring into this, because when like I said, I was the first one to admit when we were talking about this, I've heard people throw around the whole term about generational trauma, but didn't really look into it as much, in terms of what actually does it manifest itself. But one thing that I kept seeing and that kept coming up was the word shame, and the fact, and you have all this stuff reported about honor-based violence and all this. I hate that term, and I wish media would stop using the word honor. There's no honor in killing at all. It's a murder, out and out. If a woman is killed by someone she knows, in my book, that's murder, and that's how she's tried. She's not tried under a separate indictment for, this is an honor-based killing, rather than a plain cold-blooded murder. So that's got to change, because it then indirectly piles on that kind of generational trauma, that we are a community that has this specialised honor-based violence, but all communities have it. It doesn't matter about the colour. But this whole idea that you will bring shame on your family or your community if you do certain things, like marry out of your culture and community. If you are in an abusive relationship, if you say anything about it, then you'll bring shame on the family, just like you mentioned about the people that and mental health, which is a worry. I mean, I know that's changing because we've talked about that previously, but there seems to be like a shame in admitting if you have any mental health issues, and those things, like the mental health aspect, I feel is like a new generational trauma that's coming up, because there seems to be more and more kind of mental health related issues in our community, but less speaking out about them. And what can we do about that, Ayesha? I mean, do you see that in your clients?
Absolutely, yeah. I think looking at the first thing you mentioned, the shame thing. Shame is when you're not able to be open about what's going on, when you're isolated, when you feel alone with it, and it's yours to hold. That burden is yours to carry on your own, and that does come from, you can't say anything because you're going to embarrass the family, and you can't, even in situations where there's been severe abuse in families, and they know it's happening or it's happened historically and presently, the victims have been told to not say anything, and to keep it quiet because it's embarrassing for the family. And then that isolates and causes shame. Like, the person who's gone through it, the trauma, is somehow wrong because they're the ones that are trying to bring it up or have highlighted it, or through other mental health conditions. It's turned on them, because and that's where the shame comes from. It's from having to deal with it in isolation and being almost shunned by your community and your family, and not having anyone to identify that for you and identify with, and someone to say, right, okay, I can hear what you're saying, and someone to acknowledge it, and affirm it and say, I can see that was difficult. An
important first step, isn't it, that?
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely. But it's hard to break that shame, isn't it, and go out for support. And even though we've made absolutely amazing, headway in mental health and working with our own communities, we're still, I feel like, and this is my personal opinion, when I come across clients, Asian clients, especially young women, they want to hide the fact that they're having therapy. They won't have it face to face, or they'll say, can we just do a phone call, because I've got my own practice, and they won't come to the area because they don't want to be seen. And obviously I respect and support that, and I've got different ways of working with people, but it does push me back a bit. I'm like, wow, is this still happening? And it makes me really sad. It makes me really sad that they have to hide that, But I can see it because when I qualified, I've kind of pushed the way in my family for therapy and talking about it and advocating it because obviously this is the career I went down a few years ago. And I've seen a change in my family as well. Because, again, just like other families from our community, we don't talk about that, No, it's fine. I don't need to talk about that. Like, even my mum, and hopefully she won't mind me saying this, but, my mum's been through a lot of loss, a lot of bereavement and a lot of historical trauma as a child. And, the way that's manifested, if I look back at my mum as a parent, absolutely amazing parent, but you can see, she's tried to be the best, but that trauma has affected her. It's affected her, her mental health over the years. It's affected her ability to parent at times, and she's an amazing parent and she's always, she's been very aware of it, but still never gone for that support and never kind of always thought, no, we manage this in-house, we'll do this in-house, and sadly that manifests in physical illnesses, in so many different ways, not just mental health, but physically as well. Yeah. So I think we've still got a lot of work to do in this area. And I think, like your organisations like yourself, just doing that,
It's impossible for us not to be honest, because, people will say to us, well, you're a law firm, why are you interested in therapy and divorce coaching and, those kind of sort of external treatments, as it were. But we can't ignore a client who has come in and already if the relationship has broken down, they're obviously very upset. And often we're the first person that they will say out loud to, I want a divorce, or I can't continue in this relationship, or my relationship has broken down and the other parent is not letting me see my son or daughter. That's sometimes the first time they said it out loud to us in one of our meeting rooms. And, as lawyers, our job is to provide the legal options, the legal fixes, but we can't ignore the person in front of us. I cannot ignore the fact that this individual who's sitting there, I can tell that emotionally they are very damaged. They are finding it difficult to make logical decisions about the options and choices I will present for like the legal procedures, because they're highly emotional and it's a very difficult mix. And so then if I can offer options, obviously I don't do it myself, I can listen. I'm a good listener, I'm empathetic, which is why I enjoy my job, because I like to hear from clients to find out what's gone on in their lives and what's gone wrong in their lives and how I can help. But there's only so much I can do. It's where you come in, people like yourself, the therapists and the divorce coaches, even the doctors and the GPs, you know. People don't think that just because they've had a breakdown in a relationship that they haven't got a host of options. They just think, my marriage is over, my life is over, I need to just get the legal stuff fixed. But if we can then signpost them to therapists, to coaches, to GPs, or just say to them, get some help, go speak to somebody. Honestly, Ayesha, it's transformational. The people that have actually taken up the offer and going for therapy, they have come back completely different in terms of they're more stronger, they're more logical. Okay, there might be that realization that, okay, this is over and I need to now move forward with a clear head. And it's amazing to see how something like therapy or coaching can help an individual. So we can't push it enough. And I was sad to hear you say that still a lot of people try and hide the fact that they have therapy. Because even if you are not feel that you are weighed down with generational trauma, if you're a strong, confident person, I think just talking to somebody about what you're experiencing, whether it's through your parents or through your children or through your friends, because sometimes just by having a friend who's going through a traumatic relationship, you by default take on board, that trauma too. And, I'm interested to hear from you. You mentioned your mom. Would she have identified that she was having these kind of feelings or traumas So then you were able to talk through them, or was it you that recognized this once you'd done your therapy training?
Yeah, I think it was me that recognized it, and kind of highlighted, because my mum had some physical illnesses, and she kind of struggled with how to manage that and understand it. And we were obviously naturally worried about her, and then I started doing some research into it and reading into it and looking at what the causes are and stuff. And the causes were things like attachment issues, generational trauma, childhood trauma.
Can you give me an example of what an attachment issue might be generally?
So for example, I'll give you a client issue, example of a client. So I had this one client who came because she was having trouble with her own relationship. Her marriage was breaking down, and she was really struggling, and it affecting her mental health. She was depressed and had really bad anxiety. And when we unpicked it, it came back, but she weren't able to do anything about it. She couldn't communicate with her partner. She couldn't say what was going on. She just kind of disassociated from the situation.
Oh, okay.
So kind of removed herself emotionally from that situation. And when we unpicked that behaviour, it went back to her mum. So her mum did the same thing. Her mum coped with stress and trauma by disassociating, by kind of her brain leaving the situation and not having to deal with it. So being there but not being present, almost you're in the room but there's no one home.
And how does that manifest? Is it isolation? Is it just not engaging?
Well, with her as a child, it manifested in her needs not being met. No one to... Mum's there, but, like I said, the lights are on, but no one's home, because mum's so in her own head and traumatized that she just can't function. So there's a lack of care, there's a lack of self-care, there's a lack of care to the child's needs. So, basic things like her getting food on time, getting to school on time.
So it's had a roll-on effect with everything.
Yeah, communicating with her, showing her love, showing her that it's okay to not be okay. So she actually took the role of parenting her parent, which caused more trauma for her, because the person that was supposed to give her care was in such a...
Yeah, couldn't do it.
Just couldn't do it, and she was able to recognise that. She had a lot of kind of animosity and upset towards her mum, but when we unpicked it and looked at, her mum was having her own trauma and unable to manage it and had no support. Again, from our community, South Asian community, so just kind of dealt with it, internalised it all, and didn't get any external support. But it did affect her childhood, and it did affect how she parented, and you can see that generational trauma. She was doing exactly the same, because she'd seen, she'd learned that behaviour, she'd seen that this is... Maybe she didn't think it was right, but that's all she knew how to do, and it was manifesting in her relationship.
Yeah. I honestly, listening to stories like that, it makes me quite sad, because as a woman who has never really been held back from career choices, and I'm sure I've got some kind of generational trauma. We all have, right? We all hold something. But, I just, when I listen to stories like this lady you were saying, I honestly feel that so many women, particularly in our community, I feel if they'd had the right, advice or awareness about these kind of issues, and, just someone talking to them that how you are feeling, even if it's manifesting in a physical illness, because that seems to be quite high in our community.
Yeah.
And you do see women going out for walks in teams, with the little trainers on a Sunday morning.
Yeah.
It's really good that they get out and do that. But, I honestly feel that therapy should be something that you go, like you get a prescription. Like you go and get paracetamol, you should have a prescription for therapy, because just them acknowledging how they might be feeling, they might not have the words for it, they might not know the word of generational trauma or all of that, but I feel a lot of them have been held back. And when I speak to some of these women, they have amazing aspirations, dreams, ambitions and skills. They have amazing skills, But because they're sort of pushed to say, well, no, your role has got to be just as a mother, homemaker. We don't do that in our family. Nobody's ever worked in our family. You know, I hear all these kind of things.
Yeah.
If a girl is successful and she's, you know, looking to get married to somebody, then the other family will say, well, nobody in our family works after children. They have to forego their career. And I just feel that a lot of women have so many amazing but repressed, you know, skills, and it makes me sad. And I just think that if we had a way of getting people talking for a start, I think that's the first thing. If therapy has still got this taboo, and it shouldn't be. You said it in day one, Ayesha, that therapy should be like going to a spa.
Yeah,
and I honestly
think it should.
hold you to that. I really think it is. We look after our body with massages, with creams. I mean, the world's gone mad with all this Korean skincare and, you know, looking after yourself and these kind of weird, you know, natural sponges. But
and we'll happily spend money on that.
We'll happily spend on it. And whereas therapy, I think, gets to the depths of things where naturally, if you work from the inside out, you're going to feel and look better. But who's going to crack that code? It's got to happen one person at a time. Obviously, small changes, but maybe collectively, you know, we all think, right, we're all going to, you know, have a conversation together. We're going to talk more. You know, we're going to not invalidate people's feelings. I think that happens a lot, doesn't it, in our community?
It does. We do invalidate people's feelings, and that's the crux of it, isn't it? Not feeling heard and seen.
Yeah.
And that's where that trauma can kind of multiply and manifest in other ways, like depression, PTSD, because you've got no space to talk, you've got no space to be validated. Your experience is not, it's not seen as real. You know, someone's saying that, well, it doesn't matter.
Why is that, Ayesha? Why does, is it, do you think it's out of fear?
Yeah, because then you have to accept that there's a problem.
Yeah.
And with a problem, there needs to be solutions, and there needs to be ways to fix that, and you know, go forward from that.
Yeah.
You need to be solution focused. But if you're not willing to say that we might be part of perpetuating that problem.
So it's accountability as well, is it?
Absolutely, yeah. Yeah.
So, you know, we always at the end of these kind of sessions like to give the listeners or the viewers some kind of tools or things that they can do, some actions. What would you say as a therapist if somebody feels that they are holding on to, or, you know, being subjected to some kind of generational trauma? What would you say to them? If someone came to you tonight and said, Ayesha, I feel that there is some generation trauma that's holding me back. I don't know how to articulate it. What can I do?
I think I'd start with empathizing with their situation and really making them feel okay about talking about it and normalizing it, you know, just letting them feel that it's okay, that it's normal to feel like that with that kind of situation, and that they're really brave to come forward. You know, it's not easy, especially in our community, to come forward and say, I think something's wrong, I think I need some help. But really nurturing that and cultivating that, you know, making them feel they've done the right thing, making them feel seen and heard, and validating what they've gone through, their experience.
Yeah.
Because with generational trauma, because there's other family members involved, you'll have people say, no, that didn't happen.
Yeah,
that didn't happen. And it kind of shuts you down, doesn't it? Because your experience is being, you know, undermined, and it's not being accepted. And
do you think that's compounded with this whole, I don't think we've touched on it yet, is you're brought up to accept and not question what your elders are saying?
Yeah, definitely.
Hugely.
Yeah, I think so. And I still see it sometimes in my family members as well. You know, if you've got an older auntie and she said something, you know, and it's like, oh, it don't matter because, you know, she's old now.
Yeah,
she's said
don't say anything.
In fact, we were laughing the other day. I've got an auntie who's pushing on 70, and we've got a joke in our house, like, once someone gets to 70, they've got a free pass to say what they want.
Oh, I look forward to that then.
Like, because sometimes like my aunties will come out with some really, really funny stuff, and me and my sisters, we'll just look at each other and we're like, we'll laugh and say, oh, did you hear what she said? But we're like, oh, it don't matter, she's old now, it's fine. But actually, if you look at the seriousness of that, that comes from us just accepting, you know, what our elders have said and what they've learned, and the kind of wisdom that they've sent down and not questioning
Not
it.
questioning it.
And that is definitely a cultural thing. And
Yeah.
even in subcultures within families, you know, oh, you can't say that. That's your,
Yeah.
you know, older uncle, or that's your, you know, that's your granddad. And it's,
Yeah.
and you've continued to believe that.
Yeah.
And you see that historically as well. And you see that in you know, in jobs and at the GP, and, you know.
Yeah, just accepting what
Yeah,
you're
just
told.
accepting what
Yeah.
you're told, because that person's got the credentials, and, you know, historically we've always listened to that person with a white coat on, and,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah. So first thing is definitely to empathise and validate somebody who's
Yeah,
feeling like that.
definitely.
And then, so what would be the next step? Then if someone's listening to this and they're thinking, I want to do something about this, what would they do next?
I think definitely, you know, get some support. Therapy is definitely something that I would absolutely advocate, because it's so hard talking to people that are in your family about it, because sometimes you can re-traumatize, you know, because that person's got their experience of it, you've got your experience, they might not match up.
Yeah.
They might not match up, and then that invalidates what you're feeling. So having someone outside that can be, you know, objective and offer you that support and validation and understanding without being fully immersed in the nitty gritty of it, or emotionally involved, that's really helpful.
Yeah.
And then they can help you find strategies to manage that.
Okay.
You know, mostly we work in a trauma-informed way where we try not to re-traumatize. So that happens by following that client's journey and validating that journey and supporting that journey without judgment, and helping them to understand it, helping them to understand why they act a certain way or why they've developed unhealthy coping mechanisms.
Yeah.
You know, because you can be really hard on yourself sometimes.
Yeah,
why am I like this, and why am I doing that? And kind of giving that compassion about, well, this is why you're doing that, and it's understandable why you're doing that, and helping them to develop healthier ways of managing that trauma. So yeah, that's where I'd start, getting support, going for therapy.
That's really
counselling.
really helpful. Yeah. So I think, you know, it's been really sort of useful unpicking all of that generational trauma, because I think our community holds and carries a lot of it, and I think we should start talking more. You know, this community should start speaking together, maybe holding some sessions where people can come together and speak together. You know, maybe that you could do that, Ayesha, you know, have a group of women and a round table even, or a discussion with them, and say, you know, letting them know that it's okay to feel the way. It's not shameful. It's not wrong. You know, if they are, you know, if something's weighing heavy on them, then let's speak about it. What could be causing it, and you can introduce sort of mechanisms to deal with that.
Yeah,
to live your life to the fullest. I just do feel that these things weigh you down and you don't live to your full potential, and that always makes me, like I said before, kind of disappointed and sad that we should be helping each other to live to their full potential.
We should.
I think for me, I just want to say this whole thing that log kya kehenge. Look will always kehenge, right? They will always kehenge. It'll be today, you might be what they're kehenge about. Tomorrow it might be somebody else. Don't let that bother you in the slightest. You know, it's, what do they say? Today's news is tomorrow's news, chip paper or whatever.
This is true.
So don't let that hold you back. Let them talk. They'll always find something to talk about. It's not, no skin off your nose. Because I think that's one of the biggest things that stops clients that come to me from taking that first step, and they then sit in those situations for years, and then the abuse is compounded, the problems manifest massively, and it's much harder then to do the work to come out of it.
Absolutely.
Whereas if we're honest from the beginning and start, and I do see elements of it, I'm sure you do too, in the younger generation, are questioning, like you say, and saying, well, why is that then? And that doesn't actually make sense, and those kind of things. And we shouldn't disregard that kind of questioning. We couldn't say, oh no, don't say that. That's rude, you know, don't say that to somebody older. Allow it as an important discussion, you know, and hopefully that'll open things out. So, you know, I've really enjoyed this discussion today. It's been so eye-opening for me.
Yeah.
So, but is there anything else that you want to finish off by saying, Ayesha?
I think I mean, intergenerational trauma is a massive subject, and I think we've tried to cover basics, but yeah, I think anyone that's suffering or feels like they're suffering from any type of trauma, you know, get some support and don't stay quiet
Yeah.
and don't worry about what other people are thinking or saying, because
Absolutely.
like you said, let them. And
Yeah,
I love that.
let
I
them.
love that. Let them.
There is somebody,
There
isn't
is.
there, who
I
says
was.
this?
She did. She's written a book, Mel something.
Okay.
And
I've just
it's
heard
her
the
theory. It's
term.
called Let Them Theory.
Let them theory.
But I really love it because she just says, let them. And with let them is, it doesn't mean that you ignore your feelings or you shut down your emotions. You acknowledge it, but you also acknowledge that you can't allow someone to have such a big impact on how you process it and what you do to support yourself and move forward. That let them think what they want. You still need to be you. You still need to do what you need to do to be okay, and to live, you know, a fulfilling life. Because life's so short, isn't it?
It is so short, and there's so many great opportunities in life.
Absolutely.
And you know, if you don't get the chance to capture them, then they might not come back.
Yeah.
So yeah, 100%. I think I'll have a look at this let them theory.
Yeah,
I
definitely.
think it's great. But thank you for joining us again today.
Thank you for having me. It's been amazing.
No, it's been wonderful as always. Speak to you. Like I say, I always say this, but I feel like I've had therapy once I've had a talking session with Ayesha. So if you want to get in touch with Ayesha, we'll put her email address at the bottom of this video, and we'll put ours there as well in case you need any legal advice around these issues. Take care. Till next time. Bye.